You see, the world we walk upon is not what it appears to be. Beneath your feet, there is another world, a silent civilization older than humankind, more ancient than the trees themselves. And it hums invisibly beneath every step you take. The soil is not dead matter. It is alive. It thinks, it feels, it remembers. It dreams through roots and filaments, and the slow pulse of decay becoming life. Now, we have this strange notion that consciousness only happens inside skulls, that thought is something private, sealed away behind the face. But the forest has been thinking far longer than we have had words for thinking. The mycelium, those fine silken threads stretching through the earth, are not mere roots. They are nerves. They connect tree to tree, stone to stone, creature to creature, weaving a conversation so vast that it includes you, even when you imagine you are apart from it. It is an exquisite joke of nature that the very ground you ignore is, in truth, the mind of the planet itself. We spend our lives gazing at branches and blossoms, admiring the visible, while the real intelligence, the real mystery, lies in the dark underneath. That, you see, is the same mistake we make about ourselves. We believe the visible face is who we are, while the real self, the living root, remains unseen, humming quietly beneath the surface. So, if you would understand consciousness, don't look only to the brain, look to the soil. For the brain is but a clever mushroom growing from the mycelium of the universe. The mind, like the forest, does not begin or end in any one organism. It spreads, it shares, it recycles, it speaks without a tongue and listens without ears. Imagine this. Every breath you take contains the exhalation of a tree. Every thought you have has been whispered by the wind through leaves and veins of wood. You are not standing in nature. You are standing as nature, temporarily shaped as a human, borrowing molecules that once belonged to rivers, stones, and ferns. The forest beneath the forest is not a metaphor, it is the fact. It is the living demonstration of unity masquerading as multiplicity. The oak thinks it is an oak, the pine thinks it is a pine, and you, dear listener, think you are you. But underground, all of you are one continuous dance of communication and exchange. And isn't it curious that this great intelligence, this planetary mind, doesn't need to boast. It doesn't post its thoughts on screens, doesn't need to prove itself right, doesn't shout about enlightenment. It simply is. It gives, it receives, it transforms death into life and life into death without any anxiety about who owns what. That is wisdom, the wisdom of the mycelium, which never claims credit for its miracles. The forest beneath the forest is whispering something very simple. There is no separation. The earth beneath you is your own nervous system turned outward. You are a cell in its body, a voice in its dreaming. And when you truly see that, you stop asking how to connect with nature, for you realize, at last, that you were never disconnected. You see, we human beings have been under a curious spell, the spell of separateness. We imagine ourselves as solitary creatures, each locked inside a tiny fortress of skin, surrounded by a world of others. And so we say, this is me, and that is everything else. We even speak of man versus nature, as if the trees were opponents and the clouds were plotting against us. But this, my friends, is like a wave believing it is separate from the ocean. The wave rises, proud and foamy, saying, "Look at me! I'm important! I'm distinct!" And then, of course, it falls back into the sea, bewildered that it ever thought otherwise. We live much the same way. We call ourselves individuals, from the Latin individuum, that which cannot be divided. And yet we spend our entire lives dividing ourselves from everything else, from the air we breathe, from the ground we stand on, Even from each other, we draw little lines called borders and fences, religions and identities, and we defend them as though our lives depend on them. But the universe laughs gently at these imaginary boundaries. For when you trace any line far enough, it dissolves. The border between you and the atmosphere? You inhale it every moment. The line between you and your food? You eat it, and it becomes your body. The boundary between you and your thoughts? They come and go like clouds in a sky that belongs to no one. And yet, we persist in our splendid illusion because, you see, it's useful. It allows us to play the game of being someone. It gives us the drama of success and failure, love and loss, gain and grief. Without the idea of me, the play would have no plot. And so, in the grand theater of life, the universe disguises itself as you, just for the fun of pretending. Still, there comes a time when the pretending begins to ache. You feel it when you look at the stars and sense something ancient calling you home. You feel it in the quiet moments when no one is around to perform for. There is a longing not for more but for less. Less pretending, less struggle, less noise. The soul whispers, I am tired of being only this person. I want to remember what I truly am. And this is where awakening begins, not as a heroic act, but as a gentle seeing through. You begin to notice that your separateness was never real, only assumed. You see that you don't have a relationship with nature. You are that relationship. You are the handshake between the sunlight and the soil, the conversation between ocean and sky, the laughter of atoms becoming aware of themselves. The mycelium beneath the forest knows this already. It doesn't hold meetings to discuss cooperation. It doesn't need moral codes to justify compassion. It simply flows because it understands if one part of the forest suffers, the whole forest feels it. This is not ethics. It is awareness. We have forgotten that awareness. We think intelligence lives in brains and progress lives in machines, while the greatest mind of all hums quietly beneath our boots. That is the tragic comedy of civilization. We build skyscrapers to prove our greatness, yet the real miracle is happening silently in a handful of soil. But the good news, and there is always good news, is that you cannot truly be separate. The illusion of isolation can only last as long as you believe in it. And once you begin to see through it, life changes. You stop struggling to control everything and start dancing with it instead. You no longer say, how do I connect with the world? You say, there you are again, my old friend, the rest of myself. And so the forest beneath the forest becomes a mirror, showing you what you have always been. Not a lonely wanderer, but the wandering of the universe itself, pretending for a while to be human. Now, imagine the earth itself, thinking not through words or theories, but through patterns, rhythms, and the whispering exchange of life. Beneath every forest lies a nervous system, a web of filaments so fine that they make our own neurons seem crude by comparison. The scientists call it mycelium, but you could just as easily call it the nervous system of Gaia. This mycelial web, stretching for miles unseen, allows trees to speak to one another, yes, literally. They share food, warn of danger, and even nurture their young through this underground symphony of exchange. It's as though the forest itself were one organism wearing many masks, oak, pine, fern, moss, all individual costumes in a single performance. And doesn't that sound familiar? That is precisely what consciousness is doing through us. The same intelligence that weaves through the roots of trees also flows through your thoughts. The same rhythm that circulates water through soil circulates blood through your veins. You and the forest are two instruments in one great orchestra, improvising the same eternal melody. But we, in our curious way, insist on calling it magic when we cannot explain it. The ancients were wiser. They saw that everything is magic. the simple wonder of things, being what they are. We moderns have become magicians who no longer believe in our own spells. We look at a mushroom pushing through the earth and say, "Ah, just biology," not realizing that biology is itself the most astonishing trick in the cosmos. What Paul Stamets discovered, and what mystics have always known, is that mycelium reveals a truth far deeper than science alone can describe. Intelligence is not confined to the head. It is everywhere, distributed, playful, self-organizing. The forest does not have a central brain, and yet it functions with extraordinary awareness. So too with the universe, so too with you. You see, the idea that there must be a little man inside your skull pulling levers and making decisions is absurd. If there were such a man, who would be inside his skull, pulling his levers? The chain goes on infinitely. Consciousness, then, is not a thing at all. It is a process, a dance of awareness playing hide and seek with itself. And mycelium, in its silent wisdom, shows us this. It teaches that thought and being are not separate acts. The forest doesn't think about growing, it is the growing. The river doesn't think about flowing, it is the flowing. And when you are truly awake, you realize that you, too, are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are the thinking itself. When we look at a web of mycelium under a microscope, we see what appears to be chaos, twisting, branching, shimmering filaments. Yet this chaos nourishes order. The pattern only becomes visible when seen from above, as though some vast intelligence were composing the whole symphony from a higher dimension. And perhaps it is, or perhaps that higher intelligence is the totality of these countless tiny minds, each doing its small part without ever needing to know the whole. That, you see, is the profound joke. The universe doesn't need to understand itself to be itself. The understanding is already built into the being. The knowing is in the growing, the thinking in the flowing. And that is the secret the forest has been whispering since before there were words, a secret so simple we overlook it because it hides in plain sight. So, when next you walk among trees, do not imagine you are an outsider peering into a strange world of nature. You are walking through your own extended body. The rustling leaves are your own thoughts moving through air. The dew on the moss is your own feeling condensed. The mycelium underfoot is your nervous system turned outward, stretching into the soil of stars. And as you listen closely, perhaps you will hear the soft laughter of the forest, the laughter of consciousness, recognizing itself at last in the roots and the rain and the quiet wonder of being. Now, let us speak about that small but noisy creature you call yourself. It's a funny thing, really, this I, this little bubble of identity we defend so fiercely. We polish it, we promote it, we protect it. We build walls around it and call those walls my opinions, my achievements, my story. And yet, this self is no more solid than a soap bubble. It shimmers beautifully for a moment in the sunlight, reflects the whole world upon its surface, and then, with the slightest breeze, it vanishes. You see, what we call the ego is simply a pattern of attention. It's the habit of mistaking the spotlight for the whole stage. The play of life is vast, full of countless characters, and yet we imagine that our role is the central one. We forget that the actor is not the play, just as the wave is not the ocean. The ego says, I'm thinking. But if you watch closely, you'll notice that thoughts arise all by themselves, just as the heart beats and the lungs breathe. You do not command them any more than you command the clouds. The real you is not the thinker, it is the space in which thinking happens. Now, the marvelous thing about mushrooms, those little sages of the soil, is that they have no interest in pretending. They do not say, I am an individual fungus. They simply grow, merge, decay, and return. In their silent wisdom, They show us that the idea of a separate self is a convenient fiction, useful for a while, but exhausting to maintain. When the sense of separateness begins to dissolve, people often think they are losing something. They say, "I'm afraid. I'm disappearing." But what's actually happening is far more beautiful. You are not disappearing, you are reappearing. As everything, the walls between you and the world begin to melt, and suddenly you realize that you were never imprisoned at all. The self is a role, a costume, a temporary mask worn by the universe for the sheer delight of pretending to be many. The Hindus call this Leela, the divine play. The universe hides from itself in 10,000 forms, and then at just the right moment, it remembers. It wakes up and says, "Ah, it was me all along." That is what people call ego death, though nothing truly dies. The mask falls away, and the actor laughs, for it was never really attached to the mask in the first place. When the play ends, the actor does not mourn. He bows. And you see, this dissolution is not an act of annihilation, but of integration. Just as a leaf falls and becomes soil, so too the self falls back into the great mycelial web of being. Every experience you've ever had, your joys, your sorrows, your triumphs, they all return to feed the living system of consciousness, enriching it. You are compost for the cosmos. Isn't that glorious? To realize that even your fears are fertilizer, that your mistakes are food for growth. The forest does not weep over fallen leaves. It transforms them. It turns what is finished into nourishment for what is beginning. And so, when you let your old self dissolve, you are not losing life. You are participating in life's endless recycling of form into form. To cling to ego is to resist that flow, to clutch the handful of water that slips through your fingers. To release it is to discover that you are the river. You are the current that carries everything, not the vessel that tries to hold it. So, if you find your sense of self beginning to soften, do not resist. Don't scramble to put the pieces back together. Smile. Let the bubble burst, because when it does, you will find that you were never just the bubble at all. You were always the air within it, and the air around it, and the sky stretching endlessly beyond. The mushroom understands this perfectly. It grows quietly from the dark, feeds on decay, and offers beauty without pride. In its brief existence, it shows us the secret of all existence, that the self which tries to survive forever is an illusion, and that freedom is found not in holding on, but in letting go. And so, as the ego dissolves, the laughter of the forest becomes your own. You recognize yourself in the rain, the roots, the light, and you see, with great relief, that there was never anything to protect, nothing to achieve, nothing to become, only to be. You see, everything in this universe is involved in a most extraordinary process, a process of continuous recycling, of transformation, of exchange. The cosmos is, quite literally, eating itself in order to stay alive. And that, to me, is the most beautiful thing imaginable. We treat death as though it was some sort of cosmic mistake, as if life had fumbled the ball and we are here to fix it. We say, how tragic, how unfair. But when you look closely, you see that death is not the enemy of life, it's the engine of it. The two are not opposites, but two faces of the same coin, turning endlessly in the fingers of eternity. The mushroom, that quiet sage of the forest, understands this better than any philosopher. It consumes the fallen, digests the forgotten, and in doing so, prepares the soil for what is yet to come. It transforms decay into fertility, endings into beginnings. So, you might say, the mushroom is nature's priest, performing the sacred sacrament of transmutation every single day. Now, Most of us are afraid of this idea of being broken down, of being scattered. We think, I don't want to be recycled. I want to persist, to stay me forever. But imagine if the ocean said to the waves, I will only let you rise, never fall. It would become a stagnant pool, lifeless and dull. The vitality of the world depends entirely on its ability to let go of form, to surrender each moment into the next. And so, death is not destruction, it's transformation. It's how the universe breathes. Every inhale is life, every exhale is death, and yet the breathing never stops. The illusion of finality is only in our thinking. When you exhale, do you mourn the air that leaves your body? Of course not, because you know another breath is coming. You, my dear listener, are that breath, a temporary condensation of the infinite into a particular pattern. And when your pattern dissolves, the energy, the consciousness, the awareness that animates it does not vanish. It merely changes costume, slips into another dance. Look at the forest. The same atoms that once formed dinosaurs now bloom as daisies. The same carbon that burned in the hearts of stars now courses through your veins. You are ancient beyond reckoning. You have died and been reborn countless times, though you have forgotten the rhythm. You see, life and death are not two separate events, but one continuous vibration, like the crest and trough of a single wave. We fear the trough because we forget that it carries us back to the crest, but the wave never stops being the ocean. You never stop being existence. When you truly see this, death loses its sting. You no longer resist the ebb and flow. You start to dance with it. You realize that every falling leaf, every fading day, every goodbye is just another verse in the song of return. This is why nature is so calm about death. The forest does not tremble when autumn comes. It simply lets go, and by letting go, it ensures that spring will come again. We humans, on the other hand, clutch our leaves, paint them green, and shout at the wind. We take the whole affair far too seriously. The cosmic joke, and it's a very good one, is that you can't hold on to anything, because there is nothing to hold. The moment you try to freeze the flow, it slips through your fingers, and when you finally laugh and let it go, you discover that you were the flow all along. So, perhaps we might learn something from the mushroom. It doesn't lament the end. It celebrates the exchange. It knows that to feed others is to continue the great feast of being. The self that dies in one form is reborn in another, not as punishment, not as reward, but as play. The universe is playing a game of hide and seek with itself, pretending to be 1,000 things just to enjoy the surprise of remembering. And so, when your time comes, as it will for every leaf and every star, you will not fall into nothingness. You will fall back into everything. You will rejoin the forest beneath the forest, where all that was, all that is, and all that will be are already one. And then perhaps you will sprout again as a mushroom, a breeze, a heartbeat, or a laugh echoing through eternity. For the universe never tires of itself. It only changes its tune. You see, every so often, life offers us a peculiar opportunity to glimpse itself more clearly. Some stumble upon it through meditation, some through silence, and others, quite by accident, through a little mushroom sprouting from the damp soil. And in that moment, the whole game of reality seems to crack open like an egg, revealing something vast, laughing, and unspeakably alive. Now, people often say, I had a psychedelic experience. But that's rather like saying, I had a universe. You don't have such an experience, you become it. The boundaries that separate you from everything else begin to dissolve, and you realize that all along, you were the very field in which experience itself arises. But let's be clear, this revelation does not belong to chemicals or rituals. The mushroom is only a messenger, a curious envoy from the forest reminding us of what we've forgotten. It is the finger pointing to the moon, not the moon itself. When you get the message, as I've said before, hang up the phone. What the psychedelic door reveals is not some alien world, but the ordinary world, seen clearly. You begin to see how extraordinary it has always been. The green of a leaf is no longer just green. It is emerald light singing the hymn of chlorophyll. The air shimmers with an intelligence you can feel. You realize that reality has never been silent. You were simply talking too loudly to hear it. And in that vast seeing, something very important happens. The seriousness of the human drama begins to loosen its grip. You realize that the universe is not a prison, but a performance. It is not a problem to solve, but a riddle to enjoy. Every tear, every triumph, every absurdity is part of the same divine joke. Now, some come back from such experiences proclaiming, "I've found the truth." But the wiser ones simply smile because they know the truth cannot be found. It is. You cannot capture it, bottle it, or quote it. The moment you try to define it, it slips away, like trying to grab a handful of sunlight. What the mushroom teaches, if you listen quietly enough, is humility. The humility to stand before the mystery and admit, I don't know. And in that not knowing, the heart opens. The mind stops wrestling and begins to dance. You discover that wisdom is not having the answers, but being comfortable in the astonishment of existence. It is a strange paradox. The moment you stop chasing enlightenment, enlightenment comes skipping up behind you, taps you on the shoulder, and says, "Peekaboo!" But there is a warning in all this, a gentle one. If you open the door to the infinite, don't mistake the view for a destination. Many wander too far into the visions and forget to return. The goal is not to escape the world, but to see it anew. To carry that vision back into the marketplace, into your kitchen, into the simple act of being kind. Because, you see, the point of awakening is not to hover above life, but to be fully immersed in it without drowning in it. The psychedelic moment is a rehearsal for the great awakening that can happen right here. While washing dishes or walking in the rain, the mushroom, humble and unassuming, offers us a peek through the cosmic keyhole. It shows us that consciousness is not locked in the head, but spread through everything that is. And once you have seen that, truly seen it, you realize that you never needed the key at all. The door was never closed. And so, we bow to the teachers of the soil, not as idols, but as reminders. For the real revelation is not what they show you, but what they make you remember. That you are already home, already whole, already the mystery you've been seeking. You see, the universe is never silent. It is always speaking, though not in the language of words. It speaks in wind and rainfall, in bird call and thunder, in the murmuring of rivers and the hush of breathing. And whether you notice it or not, you are part of that conversation. You always have been. But somewhere along the way, humanity began to think it was the only one talking. We invented words, and then, somehow, we mistook them for the whole of communication. We forgot that long before speech, there was music. Before philosophy, there was rhythm. Before thought, there was heartbeat. The forest, for example, doesn't use grammar. It converses in scent, in shade, in the gentle trade of pollen and carbon. Trees whisper to one another through the soil, sending messages of warning and care through those hidden threads of mycelium, the great internet of the earth. One tree says, "I have sunlight to spare," and another replies, "I have water." And together, they make the green breath of the world. You and I are part of that very same web. Every breath you take is a conversation between your lungs and the leaves. Every word you speak is the air returning to itself in a slightly different shape. When you sigh, the universe exhales through you. When you laugh, it's the cosmos giggling at its own clever disguise. But we've become rather self-centered in this dialogue. We treat nature as though it were a stage, set something over there, separate, a backdrop for human dramas. Yet, it is not a backdrop. It is the actor, the script, and the audience all at once. Nature is not something you look at. It's something you are in, something you are. Think of the way your body works. The bacteria in your gut, the oxygen in your blood, the minerals in your bones. None of these belong to you, and yet without them, you would not exist. You are a walking ecosystem, a colony masquerading as a person, and the moment you see that, you can't help but laugh, because the whole notion of me and the world collapses into one great laughter of being. The great conversation, then, is not about communication across distance. It's about recognizing that there was never distance in the first place. Every sound, every color, every sensation is the universe talking to itself through a million mouths. You are not listening to the world, you are the world listening. And isn't it curious that the quieter you become, the more eloquent the conversation grows? The trees start to speak again. The clouds regain their personalities. Even silence becomes a voice, not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything. When you stand in a forest and simply listen, you begin to sense that you are standing inside a single living being. The rustle of leaves is not separate from your breath. It is your breath drawn out into the open, the hum of insects, the creak of branches, the rhythm of your heartbeat. All these are parts of one vast symphony, playing the eternal music of now. You see, the great tragedy of modern civilization is that we've forgotten how to listen. We hear, but we do not attend. We look, but we do not see. We've replaced the living conversation with our own monologue of control, talking endlessly about saving the planet, as though the planet were some poor patient waiting for our clever rescue. But perhaps the truth is the opposite. Perhaps it is we who are being healed, slowly, by remembering how to listen again. Because the moment you truly listen, without trying to extract or explain, you fall into harmony. You stop being an observer and become a participant once more. The forest doesn't need your ideas. It needs your attention. The river doesn't require your help. It invites your humility. And when you listen that deeply, you hear something marvelous, a laughter, soft but infinite, rising through everything. It is the laughter of the universe talking to itself, delighted to have found its own voice in 1,000 forms. In the birds and the bees, yes, but also in you. You are not apart from this symphony. You are the melody that forgot it was music. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet place, don't ask for silence. Listen to the silence. It is speaking. It is saying, welcome back to the conversation. You see, once you've glimpsed the great conversation, once you've heard that the forest is speaking, that the air itself is alive, the question becomes, what now? What are we to do with such knowledge? The ego always wants an assignment. It says, now that I've awakened, surely I must go forth and do something extraordinary. But the universe chuckles softly and says, no, my friend, you are already doing the extraordinary. You are existing. The return, then, is not a journey outward, but a gentle falling back into the ordinary, into simplicity, into the quiet miracle of breathing. The awakened life is not about becoming a saint, or a sage, or a superhero. It is about remembering how to be human fully, joyfully, humbly. The mycelium beneath the forest does not try to prove its enlightenment. It simply does its work, connecting, nourishing, dissolving, creating. It thrives in darkness, invisible but essential. So too, when you awaken, your task is not to proclaim it from the rooftops, but to live it quietly, like the mushroom in the soil, sustaining life by your very presence. And so, the practice is not grand. It is small, invisible, and constant. It begins when you open your eyes in the morning and realize that waking up is already a miracle. It continues when you pour your coffee, feeling the warmth in your hands and remembering that this simple act connects you to the earth, to rain, to farmers, to sunlight, to the stars that birthed the atoms in your cup. You begin to see that every moment is a prayer, every action a ritual. Washing the dishes is not a chore. It's a conversation with water. Walking down the street is not a commute. It's a pilgrimage. Eating is communion. Breathing is meditation. Living itself becomes the practice. And what of all the spiritual techniques, the mantras, the postures, the disciplines? They are fine tools, useful stepping stones. But do not mistake the raft for the shore. When you realize that every instant is sacred, you no longer need to divide life into sacred and profane. The divine hides in the mundane, waiting patiently to be noticed. We often imagine that awakening must feel constant, like a light that never flickers. But the truth is more gentle. You awaken, then forget, then awaken again. It's like waves meeting the shore. Rise, fall, rise, fall. This rhythm is not failure. It is the awakening. You are not meant to stay still. You are meant to flow. And when you fall back into forgetfulness, do not scold yourself. The mushroom does not curse the dark. When the light fades, it grows in it. So when you lose your sense of clarity, remember this too is part of the process. Awareness is not about holding on to light, but learning to see in the dark. The return to simplicity also means loosening your grip on certainty. You no longer need to know what the universe is doing. You trust its intelligence the way a tree trusts the soil. You stop demanding meaning and begin to taste it. You stop searching for purpose and begin to embody it. To live simply is to live like nature, spontaneous, responsive, unhurried. When hungry, eat. When tired, rest. When joyful, dance. When moved, create. When confused, wait. That is the way of the forest, the way of the Tao. And perhaps the most profound practice of all is simply kindness. To look at another human being and see not a stranger, but another expression of the same consciousness that looks through your own eyes. To care, not because you must, but because you can't help it. Compassion becomes as natural as breathing, for you no longer see two to be reconciled, only one being playing both parts. In the end, simplicity is not something you achieve. It's what remains when complexity falls away. It's the quiet after the storm, the still pond reflecting the sky. You realize that enlightenment was never hidden. It was only buried under the noise of trying to become enlightened. So live gently, speak honestly, laugh often, be humble enough to let the universe move through you without your interference. Because when you stop trying to be spiritual, you become like the forest, silently sacred, profoundly alive, and endlessly giving. And now, my friends, we arrive where we began, back at the forest, back at the breathing earth beneath our feet. The circle closes, as it always does, because the universe is not a straight line marching to some distant goal. It is a dance, a spiral, a great laughter echoing in eternity. You see, when you finally stop searching for meaning and start hearing existence itself, you discover that life is already whole. It was never missing a piece. The meaning of life is just to be alive. That's it. But what a marvelous realization that is, that to be breathing, to be conscious, to feel warmth or sorrow or joy is already the universe's way of celebrating itself. The mycelium beneath the forest knows this perfectly. It doesn't seek enlightenment. It is enlightenment in action, dissolving what was, creating what will be, without ever asking why. It hums quietly. This is enough. And you, too, are enough. You were never separate from the pattern. You were never an outsider peering into the cosmos. You are the cosmos looking back at itself, blinking in wonder. So when you hear the philosophers asking, what is consciousness? Smile, because the question itself is consciousness playing a game of hide and seek. The seeker and the sought are the same player wearing two masks. And when the masks fall, the laughter that follows is the sound of recognition. Ah, it was me all along. We spend lifetimes trying to escape the ordinary, chasing extraordinary visions, mystical experiences, secret knowledge. But the great joke, the final punchline is that the ordinary was the extraordinary, seen without the fog of striving. The smell of rain, the taste of tea, the feel of another hand in yours, all of it is the universe, performing its own magic trick for the sheer joy of astonishment. The Buddhists say form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. The forest says the same thing in its own language. Decay is growth, and growth is decay. The laughter of God is the mushroom sprouting from the dead log. It is life winking at itself, saying, see? And once you hear that laughter, truly hear it, you can never take the play so seriously again. You will still cry, still stumble, still fall in love and lose things. But somewhere beneath it all, there will be a smile, because you know that every joy and every sorrow is part of the same music, rising and falling, rising and falling, forever. So, let the ego dissolve, let the story unwind, and rest, at last, in the knowing that nothing was ever lost. The self you've been protecting is just the wave that forgot it was the ocean. And the ocean? It has been laughing all along. In that laughter, everything is forgiven. There is no enlightenment to reach, no world to fix, no heaven to climb. There is only this, the living, breathing, shimmering dance of being. And when you can finally laugh with it, not at it, not above it, but with it, then you will understand what the forest, the mushroom, and the cosmos have been whispering since the beginning. Relax, you are already home. And so the forest beneath the forest continues its song. The mycelium spreads quietly. The stars shine. The rivers flow. The universe laughs, and in that laughter, you are born again, and again, and again.